going on, everybody? Welcome to the very first episode of Marinoni Time Sports Talk with Alex Marinoni. I'm proud to be partnered up with the Worldwide Sports Network to provide 2 episodes a week for you guys every Mondays and Fridays, talking all things sports, all the hot topics, everything that's going on. I'm also excited to bring you guys some guests with some of the connections I had with the Guardians in the XFL and some other players I've come across. Very excited to have a couple of guests on the show from time to time so we can hear from the players' perspectives on some of these things. And, of course, we're starting this podcast, unfortunately, in a time in this country that is very unfortunate with the coronavirus, and there are no sports going on. So to start a sports podcast at this time is the definition of buying low in on something. But luckily, there's some NFL talk. Very excited of what's been going on around the NFL as of right now. As many of you guys were following me before, I was very deep and involved into the XFL. Still am, but obviously with the certain situations that we're in, there's going to be no more XFL this season. They had to outright cancel the season. If you don't know by now, reason why is because you can't extend a season where some of these guys were aspiring to be NFL and CFL football players after the XFL. So Oliver Luck, Vince McMahon, and all the decision makers in the XFL decided to cancel the season and allow their guys to sign those NFL and CFL contracts when the time is ready. Now the time is ready for the NFL to do that, and as everybody's been kind of paying attention pretty much on the Twitter and NFL Network, everybody's been all over what's been going on. None of the XFL guys have been picked up because the NFL has told its teams to hold off on signing XFL guys. I guess there's got to be some sort of legal issue or something still going on where these guys can't get any takes from NFL teams. I'm not sure what's the holdup because the XFL came out and said that they fully paid out all their players for a full year and they were allowing them out of their contracts as long as they had an real-life NFL contract ready to go. So they're still assets. They still belong to the XFL until that happens. So hopefully that develops soon because we don't want to see some of these guys pretty much get screwed in being able to sign an NFL contract and teams moving on with plans B, C, and D when if, in fact, some of these guys in the XFL were plan A. I have to imagine even though this is a big quarterback class, I have to imagine guys like P.J. Walker are generating some interest somewhere. But speaking of the quarterback class, I'm going to definitely dive into some of these big offseason things that have been happening, and I'm going to start with the man that's basically terrorized my life for 2/3 of my life, and to say I'm ecstatic, it might not be enough to say that I'm just completely thrilled that this guy is out of the AFC East. But Tom Brady, it's technically not official, but seems to be will sign with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, leaving the Patriots after 20-plus years. Again, extremely excited about this. But pretty crazy and something that I don't think anyone really saw coming. Of course, there's going to be those guys on TV that are going to tell you that, of course we saw this coming. It was obvious, right? It was on the wall. You got to be kidding me. They're out of their mind. But Tom Brady going to the Bucs, pairing him with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, 2 guys, and even Perriman's not there, but if they were to bring him back or something, I mean, they were really electric last year as an offense. If they had a quarterback that didn't turn the ball over 30 times in the air, let alone the amount of fumbles, that team could have really made some noise, I think, down in the NFC South. But now they get the greatest to ever do it, and it hurts to say that, have that come out into a microphone and out to you guys, especially those that know me personally. They know that tasted terrible, but he's the greatest that's ever done it, and now he's going to get a chance to do it for a coach like Bruce Arians and work in that system, and he's going to get a chance. They still need a running game, but who knows? Maybe his presence there will open up some things in the running game. I don't think they have the greatest offensive line, but it's not bad. So he's in pretty good position there. Todd Bowles gets to reunite with Tom Brady in a good way this way. He gets to coach the defensive side while he runs things on the offense. But definitely shock to the NFL world, shock to me, shock to basically every person who eats, sleeps, and breathes Boston sports. So Brady there, definitely going to be a big shakeup, and a nice little shakeup, or a nice little note that he will be playing Drew Brees twice a year. So you got a 42-year-old going up against a 41-year-old. We could see a situation where the total passing touchdown record is going flip-flop each time these two guys take the field next year. But going to be very exciting stuff. And with that, Drew Brees is signing another 2-year deal. It seems like he's been signing 2-year deals since I can remember. 2-year, $50 million deal with the Saints to come back, and which means Teddy Bridgewater has looked to go elsewhere and does stay in the NFC South, going to the Carolina Panthers. My thoughts on that is I wanted to see Teddy take over the job. Teddy was a Pro Bowl quarterback with the Minnesota Vikings. He did a lot of great things there, and then he showed – he hasn't played a full season, but he showed he could be healthy. That was his biggest concern. As a Jet fan, when he was a Jet, I really wanted him – I loved the signing. It was a low signing for a guy with high upside, and if he could stay healthy, he could be a great player. They drafted Sam Darnold at the same time, pretty much had insurance for him, and then pretty much when they were assured that Darnold was the guy, whether they wanted to believe it or not, they were making Darnold the guy. Not that I disagree with him being the guy, but you don't spend all those draft picks and say he's not. But they ended up moving Teddy for a third-round pick, and I was rooting for him ever since. He was definitely brought class and brought talent to that quarterback room. And down in New Orleans, this past year, he had to start 5 games with Drew Brees being out. A lot of people, for some inexplicable reason, wanted to see Taysom Hill start those games. Bridgewater stepped in and won some big games, including a victory against the Cowboys while they were playing well, and going into Seattle and taking down the Seahawks among 3 other victories that he had. To me, he proved that he could be the real deal. We always knew that as far as a talent standpoint, and I honestly thought he was going to be the successor down in New Orleans, but Drew Brees just isn't ready to retire. And unlike the way the Patriots did the whole Brady-Patriot dynamic, they're not ready to let go in New Orleans. And I'm not saying that they should. Drew has been very good, so outside of his little lack of arm strength, he seems, he commands a team just as well, if not better than everyone else that does it right now. So they're in, obviously, win-now mode, so why not? They're going to go 2 years with him. And Teddy, I thought was interesting going to Carolina. Carolina doesn't look like they know what they want to do. I mean, they do have a plan. Matt Rule is taking over, as everyone knows, 7-year deal, which is crazy for a coach. But it's like with Kuechly retiring and now the news before the Bridgewater signing of Cam Newton is seeking a trade, and then the whole back and forth, Cam saying, you made me do this, I didn't want to do this, and all that nonsense. It just seems like that would rebuilding and getting Matt Rule's guys, starting from ground zero and going up, be the best decision for that team. I don't know if signing Teddy Bridgewater means they just want a competent guy playing quarterback while they rebuild, or if that means they're going all in. It's tough to tell. I mean, they still have McCaffrey, and there's definitely been no trade talk or anything crazy about moving McCaffrey, because if they were all in, the number one thing you need to do is move McCaffrey and get yourself an exorbitant amount of picks from a win-now team. But I am surprised. I would like to know who else was in on Teddy Bridgewater. I had him circled and pegged for Chicago. I thought that would have been the perfect place for him, just considering that the Bears proved 2 years ago that they don't need much from the quarterback position. The defense is that good. The running backs, Montgomery started to come on late last season. The receiving core is solid, and Allen Robinson might be the most underrated player in the game, and I mean player, not just receiver. They have all the pieces outside of the quarterback position. All he had to do was be accurate with the football because he had receivers open. Taylor Gabriel is a very underrated player himself. I think these guys are underrated because of their quarterback situation, especially Allen Robinson playing with Blake Bortles for the years before he went to Trubisky. But those are two guys, or that whole team, I should say, in general, I thought was a perfect fit for Teddy. Have that strong defense, and he's familiar with the NFC North playing with the Vikings. I just thought it would have been a very solid pick for him. But goes to Carolina, and you can't hate it. He gets paid, and he's definitely earned it. Those 5 games were more than enough to prove that this guy's back to a playoff caliber football, and he looked very healthy doing it. Never was a runner, but ran when he had to, and got the job done. And speaking of Chicago, they make a trade. They trade a 4th-round pick to the Jaguars for Nick Foles. That one caught me also by surprise. I didn't think the Jaguars were going to be able to unload Foles' contract the way they did. Especially get a 4th-round pick's not anything to write home about, but that's still not bad. I mean, that's the type of pick because of his contract. You're thinking like 6th, 7th round. So they get a 4th round out of it is actually pretty ideal considering they've clearly moved on from him with his his rough start in Jacksonville. Not all his fault. Gets into the injury, inserted 10 weeks later. It's tough to do, but it's a interesting thing because I don't know if Foles is just going to be given the job. They're going to definitely give Trubisky an opportunity for some reason to go and compete for the job. I thought I like Foles, but I didn't think they had to trade an asset. I thought they could have got similar or maybe possibly better production out of a guy like Andy Dalton had they went that route. But they're going to go with Nick Foles, and they're going to compete, and it's going to be something to watch. Something else that caught my eye, I mean the obvious, the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott. Prescott gets the franchise tag, and now for the most part it's to buy time so they can sign him long term, and that would be the right thing to do. Pretty much get all their other affairs in order and then spend pretty much the rest of your offseason making Dak happy. I mean, I don't want to give away too much of my hot take. I was going to have my own minute on this or two, and a little rant on it, but I don't know. I just feel like there's comparable guys, and I might be in the minority here. I think there are guys that can do Dak's job as well as Dak did his job. I think he's very good. I think you could win with Dak, and he has a pulse for that team. The fans love him, so it's obvious you want to keep him in, but I'm just going to say Jerry Jones is the type of guy who, love him or hate him, he's a guy that he knows football, and he knows what this team needs and what this team wants, despite some of the records they've had. But he has an idea knowing that if he has reservations of locking in a guy like Prescott and have it hamper the rest of your roster, he pretty much knows that Dak Prescott's not a guy that can pick up some holes in his roster. He knows that he needs Prescott to have Amari Cooper. He needs Prescott to have Happy Zeke. He needs Prescott to have top 3 offensive line in football and a solid defense. Dak needs those things to succeed. He's a game manager. And I could see why they are kind of hesitant on making him one of the highest paid quarterbacks in football, because the minute you make your quarterback the highest paid quarterback in football, he better be a guy like Russell Wilson who can really take your team, hide its deficiencies, and win you big-time games. And even with a pretty solid roster, one of the best rosters on paper the past couple of years, last year not winning a game against a team above 500 and not playing well in those games definitely hurt Dak's chances of getting that big contract. I know after Miami, Giants, and Redskins, all 3 in a row to start the year, I remember everybody saying pay Dak now, but you have to see it all through, and he still has room to grow. He's only 26, but I definitely see why there's reservations for Dak to get that long-term deal. I'm definitely in the minority there, but I can completely understand where the Cowboys are coming from, and I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Jalen Hurts is sitting there in the 3rd or 4th round if he's decided. I know they like Cooper Rush, and they've already extended him, which is kind of funny, thinking that they extended Cooper Rush, who has never seen the field before Dak, but there's definitely some guys that can do Dak's job, and I'll leave it at that. Speaking of more quarterbacks going on the move, Phillip Rivers to the Colts. This is another one where Colts fans are thrilled. I mean, I guess I can see why, because I don't think they're done with the full season of Jacoby Brissett. Brissett looked good early on, and then after his injury really struggled. But so did the rest of the team, and they had a lot of guys injured. And I'm not making excuses for him. He didn't play to a level that could get them to the playoffs, and I definitely agree with that. But I think he is pretty much his ceiling. We've seen enough to know that he's a second-string quarterback at this point, or possibly a journeyman type of career coming up where he's just going to be filling needs for teams. But the needle doesn't really move it for me from Phillip Rivers. I mean, everyone could point out all the deficiencies, the injuries the Chargers had last year. The offensive line wasn't great. The defense didn't play like it did the year before. But Philip Rivers also didn't play like the year before, and I know he's behind arguably the best offensive line in football, and that got shored up with Costanzo coming back this year. But I mean, this guy was making some poor decisions. You watch all of his interceptions last year. There was a lot of times where you're like, what are you, like, that's a Trubisky type decision. Like, what are you doing? He was inaccurate a lot. Now, I do know he's throwing off his back foot a lot, but you got to factor all that in. I mean, there's being not mobile like Brady, and then there's being like demobile, if that's a word for Philip Rivers. I mean, the second pressure comes at him, he has the inability to make those throws, I feel like, at this point of his career. He's 38, coming on 39 years old, and last year was a big step back. I honestly thought he played similar, like Eli type level play last year, maybe even worse, considering he had more time. But maybe a resurgence. He's going to have a guy like T.Y. Hilton, I mean, comparable to Keenan Allen, I guess, if healthy, but T.Y. is never really that healthy for a full season. Receiving-wise, I mean, they're probably one of the best teams in the AFC South as of right now. Philip Rivers does help with that, but I don't know. It doesn't move the needle for me. Maybe it's because some of these other teams in the South have taken a step back, like the Texans and the Jaguars. Maybe it's an opportunity for them to find their way into a wild card, but I mean, and I'm not going to sit here and say the Titans are going to run away and win the division now, especially signing Tannehill. Like that doesn't move the needle for me either. But that's a team that just got hot. But that's just the Philip Rivers thing doesn't make me go, okay, 11-5, 12-4, and possibly a 1 or 2 seed. It doesn't. If they miss the playoffs, I would be zero surprised. If they make the playoffs as a wild card or win the division at 9-7, I also won't be surprised. So, I mean, I get it. It's a 1-year deal, $25 million. I would expect them to draft a quarterback now or bring in a quarterback to sit behind him. I don't think you bring in a guy like Dalton or anything like that, a guy who's been established, but maybe take a flyer or just use a second or third round draft pick. I don't think there's that many quarterbacks in this upcoming draft that are going to do too much. I think there's about 3, maybe 4 that might be at some point NFL quarterbacks could be starting quarterbacks at some point, but it's definitely not the type of draft class we've seen in the past. So definitely going to be interesting to see. But I'm not in love with this move, and for me, it does not move the needle at all. And yeah, I mean, we're still going to have some more quarterbacks still up in the air. I am interested now what's going to happen with Jameis Winston. For the first time in 20 years, the New England Patriots don't know who their starting quarterback is, or maybe they do. Maybe Jarrett Stidman's the guy, and if it is, as a Jet fan, if Jarrett Stidman is the guy that we saw last year in his very, very, very limited role, hell yes. But there's a lot of questions there. They could go either way. The New England Patriot thing to do would be to take Jameis Winston now and make him the next Tom Brady, and that would just be devastating as a Jet fan, but also very comical. And honestly, at this point, there's been so much misery around the AFC East, not just the Jets, that if it happened, I think it would be laughable at this point more than anything. But yeah, so it is going to be interesting to see where some of these other guys go, especially Dalton. I can't imagine Dalton taking a number 2 job, but at this point, it seems like everyone else kind of has their guy right now, unless maybe Miami wants to move on from a guy like Fitzpatrick before they draft Tua or something. I'm not sure what the plan's going to be, but it looks like Dalton's going to sit around and eventually sign somewhere, maybe a late camp type guy, but a lot to see there. Some of the other moves though that were kind of eye-popping. AJ Green getting franchise tagged is not really surprising. It's the right thing to do, especially if they're going to go the Joe Burrow route, give him a true number 1, and hopefully he can get back to the level. An interesting move, a 2-year, $20 million deal from the Broncos for the Chargers for Chris Harris, former Bronco. That's a guy, 30 years old. Only a 2-year, $20 million commitment, so it's not the end of the world. They didn't break the bank, go Tremaine Johnson-type numbers like the Jets did, and really, go crazy there. I thought that's a good move for a team that really struggled in the secondary, especially with injuries. I guess the next biggest thing that we should all be looking out for is where Jadeveon Clowney goes. And as at this point during this podcast, I got everything up, looking around, TV's on, and there is absolutely no news about Jadeveon Clowney. I got to imagine somebody's going to sweep him up. He's not a guy that's going to get double-digit sacks. At least he hasn't been in the system to get him double-digit sacks, but he is a disruptive player, and we've seen him when he's on his game. He is one of the probably most disruptive guys in the NFL off the edge, and we've seen him play in the 3-4. We've seen him play in the 4-3. I mean, he can do both. It's not a lot of guys in the league can do that. He's only 27 as well, so where he goes and the money he gets is going to be probably the next big talking point for the NFL, but still a lot to see there. I liked his role with the Seahawks last year. I mean, we saw a couple of primetime games where he won the game by himself. So definitely going to be on the lookout for that. As a Jet fan, I don't really want to see them break the bank on anybody else right now. I do like the route they've been going with shoring up the offensive line and kind of getting the pieces. They're using free agency as a place to get the depth pieces and some of those veteran-type pieces to help you get along, and hopefully they just keep their draft assets and draft well for the first time in a long time. But you do break the bank on Clowney. Not ideal, but I'm not going to sit no. So definitely going to watch out for that. Another guy, an ex-Jet or potential returning to the Jets, is another guy unsigned is Robbie Anderson. I know that there's been some talks with the Eagles, and there's a couple other teams that could really use him. And only 26 years old, he's flashed as a burner, and he's really improved over the middle of the field, and really being an all-around wide receiver. I wouldn't say he's fully there yet, but a perfect complement receiver to a true number one, or one of those guys. One of those teams, a team like New England, could probably use him. I would not be shocked at all if he went up to New England and pair him with a guy like Edelman, and they can get another piece up there and just have a bunch of number twos. I mean, Edelman's a number one, but he's not the Julio Jones type. He's another guy that's going to beat you in space. So getting a guy like Robbie to really open up the field would be interesting to see, but we'll see where he goes. And I think the most interesting thing is the contract he's going to get. Is he going to get what he wants, which is around $14 million, or does he go Sterling Shepard range in the $10 million or even less? It's tough because his numbers would tell you definitely less than 10, probably like 7, 8. I think he's 7, 8. If the Jets went to 10, I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be thrilled, but that's not terrible. So if they did a 4-year, $40 million, wouldn't be the end of the world. I could see that being the case. But anything more than that, I think, is really pushing it for a guy who's starting to come into his own a little bit, but for as far as an all-around receiver. But in the end, he's a burner. So yes, he could take the top off the defense, but is he going to make those tough 50-50 catches on a consistent basis? And right now, he's not that. So definitely something to look out for. And another guy that is really under the radar as far as we're talking about last year was one of the topic in the offseason, him and Zeke, and he's a free agent right now. Not a lot of buzz around his name is Melvin Gordon. Did not have the year that he wanted last year after coming back from his holdout, and he did look, I don't know if it was a step slower or I think the Chargers as a whole just didn't look good last year, and he was just kind of fell victim to that. But it was hard to argue comparing him to a guy like Austin Eckler, who was going off week after week. So different skill set for sure, but Melvin Gordon is the fact that there's lack of activity and everything. I think a little bit of that is the really strong running back draft class we're about to see. So that could be a big reason into it, but it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up, and everybody's going to compare what he was asking for last year and what he gets this year. It's going to be a similar, probably even a worse case scenario as what Le'Veon Bell was, because at least Bell didn't come on the field 2 seasons ago, so you couldn't see him struggle. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Melvin Gordon. But yeah, I mean those are some of the big names. I mean, We saw Reeder get traded. Oh, and I would be crazy not to talk about my thoughts on DeAndre Hopkins. I honestly didn't think about it because I'm definitely in the majority here on just what a dumb move by Bill O'Brien. I mean, this dude is the career trajectory he's on. Statistically, is very similar to Randy Moss, Julio Jones. Like, he's in that category. And you traded him for a running back that looks about done and can't stay healthy, and a second-round pick. I mean, and to just add fuel to the fire, a couple hours later, the Vikings were able to flip Diggs for a first-rounder and 3 other picks or whatever, 4 total picks in total from the Bills. Like, are we kidding? Stephon Diggs, Mr. Inconsistent crybaby in the postseason versus DeAndre Hopkins, dude who had to deal with Brandon Weeden, Tom Savage, and I can't even remember the rest of the quarterbacks he had to deal with. It was Schaub there at his bad years, and all those other rotating doors. Brian Hoyer, all those guys playing quarterback for the Texans. Finally gets Watson, and his numbers were always still there. And he was quiet, for the most part. He just went out, did his thing, and just dominated basically everybody. And to see him get dealt to the Cardinals for just a second-round pick pretty much, and you can make the argument David Johnson. If David Johnson has a David Johnson 2 years ago year, or 3 years ago year, it's already 3 years ago since he was leading the league in rushing and receiving, but if he has a resurgent year and the Texans are better off, fine. I'm an idiot, but so is 95% of the rest of the country, maybe more. But it's just unbelievable, and it just kind of shows you that the importance of having a GM, and that what Bill Belichick does is not easy. You can't be – it's very tough to be coach and GM. It's very, very tough. So to think that you could to try to manipulate a trade and to think about what the best thing is for the team as well as coach the team, it clearly is not what Bill O'Brien can. He could barely coach the team. So to give him that kind of control, it showed. It showed how his lack of intelligence as far as the GM side goes, and what he was able to get for a guy like Hopkins. The Cardinals took advantage of it, and now Kyler Murray has Christian Kirk. He's got DeAndre Hopkins, and he's got another year of Larry Fitzgerald. You have Kenyon Drake, who looked very solid in that offense last year, and Edmonds coming back. They are going to have something on offense that is going to be pretty good, and if they can utilize Hopkins the right way with Kyler Murray's second year and some of the skill set that he has, they just have to shore up that defense. They might be a contender sooner than later. So definitely a big win for the Cardinals, and just laughable if you're the Texans. I mean, you lose Hopkins, you lose Reeder. I feel like somebody else is gone too. And it's just, I don't know, those type of decisions that if Bill Belichick made those decisions, you still question it, but you're like, Bill's got something going, or it's Bill, so it's like, how can you really argue it? But O'Brien has kind of proved year after year that, like, he's a magician. First of all, he somehow keeps his job, but he just kind of proves that he just can't be that. And very interesting that the Texans front higher-ups are pretty much all in on him despite all of this. I couldn't imagine him explaining that to ownership that this was the right move. So yeah, that's where we kind of stand right now. I would say a lot of the big names have gone. That's why it was big that I wanted to get this show out early the way I did. Typically a Monday, Friday show, but I wanted to get it out as soon because of all the noise we got from Monday on till now. I mean, there's some other names I didn't get to, like Gerald McCoy joining the Cowboys and Robert Quinn going from the Cowboys to the Bears. There's a bunch of stuff going on right now, but definitely some of my points on the big pieces, and that's what a lot of the show is going to be. I mean, going forward, we'll break down everything that's going on, give you my initial thoughts, and then as time goes on, I'll break down more into the rosters and some of the decisions, and then definitely we'll get into the draft. But this isn't just an NFL or an XFL football show. We'll be covering baseball when that time comes. We'll be covering the NBA. So definitely look out for that. Obviously, unfortunately, with the coronavirus, like I mentioned before, all the sports being down, everybody's going to need something to listen to. So I'm going to give you guys all my insight on everything, apart from being an insider. And when that time comes, especially when the XFL guys are allowed to sign, I'll let you know what players fit on an NFL roster and where the best fits are. And you're definitely going to want to tune in to hear that and get a little leg up for your teams to see where they could be targeting. So from there, I want to thank Worldwide Sports Network for having me aboard. Can't wait to produce a couple of shows for you guys every week. And with that, I'll see you next time.